Alright guys, so today we're here to talk about this, or more specifically, we're here to talk about this. And this is Metallica's brand new album, 72 Seasons. And the reason I wanted to do this video, because I know it's not normal for the channel, is I actually think this is a very important album for a lot of reasons. So just hear me out. This isn't like a typical review of the album. This isn't, going track by track or anything like that. But I want to start by what this album did to me, or what it meant before it even came out. Because when Metallica released the single Lux Eterna back in late November of 2022, it had me excited about a new album. It kind of showed they went back to like their thrash roots. It was a quick song, which isn't their normal style. Normally their songs are, 5 to 6 minutes plus. So it kind of showed they were going back in their direction of their old stuff. And I'm not one of those that thinks that the only good Metallica is the stuff released in the 80s. And I'm not one of those that thinks that when they went through the eras where they slowed things down or started trying some different things, that they sold out. The interesting thing about Metallica is this. They have different levels of fans. They have the ones that have been with them from the beginning. A lot of those do not like some of the changes that they've made, especially the change since like the Black Album. A lot of people didn't like Load and Reload at the time, although now they've kind of grown to respect those albums. There's a lot of people that don't like Saint Anger, which that one I kind of understand because the production value, they cut out solos. It just sounded maybe a little too raw, although I think it definitely kind of fits what they were going through at that time. And then they brought things back with Death Magnetic and Hardwired. And so 72 Seasons to me is a compilation of Metallica throughout all of their years. It kind of touches on the thrash side of things. It touches on the better produced side of things as far as the guitars sound clean, James' vocals sounds incredible, bass from Robert really stands out. It's not like some of the other albums. It's kind of bringing him a little bit more forward like they used to do with Cliff and Jason. Lars's drums do at times sound overly produced. They do sound like they've been cleaned up just a little too much, but maybe that's them trying to get as far away from the drum sounds of Saint Anger as they could possibly get. And then Kirk's solos are really good. There's some, that's so-so throughout the album, but for the most part, it's true Metallica. And why this album is important is when Master of Puppets was put on Stranger Things, it opened up a new fan base to Metallica. It took a generation of kids that it's very hard to keep them focused past anything that's 30 seconds long or maybe even a minute long. So the fact that they started listening to Master of Puppets and started opening up to Metallica, at least older Metallica, and we're talking about some very long songs, it's opening up a new generation to metal, to rock. And I'm not one of those that thinks, oh, well, the only good music is music back in the day, because Metallica is another perfect example. I am one of those, even though as big of a music fan as I am, I wasn't really exposed to true Metallica until Load and Reload. That was when I really started listening to them. So I wasn't one of those that, grew up on Metallica. I wasn't one of those, from Kill 'Em All, because that album actually came out about the time that I was born. So, I mean, we're talking about, I didn't get into them until much later, and I didn't get into them until an era where a lot of their fans kind of started to distance themselves or started to think that they sold out. And I'm glad that they took the steps that they did. And again, I think 72 Seasons is just a perfect example of what they're able to do. I mean, look at how old they are now. And this album is pretty incredible for what it is. Once Lux Eterna came out, it got me very interested to where I started to follow all the news about the album coming out. I wanted all the details. I really, really love the artwork and the yellow and black theme. And what's interesting about it is it made me feel like a kid again. I was like waiting for the album release date. I was waiting that morning. I went out early that morning to try to get the vinyl. One store didn't have it. I was able to get online and just order it where I could pick it up later in the day at another store. But, I was excited about release day. I was excited about getting that vinyl in my hands, even though I was already listening to it because it was available to stream that morning. But to have that physical copy, to have this artwork on this vinyl, to have the inserts, just the vinyl itself. I mean, there's nothing better than having a physical version of something that really is going to be something that kind of stands the test of time. I started to think about that. I started to think, when Load and Reload and the Black Album, when all of these different albums came out, at the time, were people even thinking that this is going to be, some music that people are going to listen to 40 years from now or 20 years from now? In most cases, you don't think about things that way. But right now, you're here at a time where an album is being released that people will be listening to 20 years from now or 40 years from now. So it's kind of awesome that you're here and you get to experience it firsthand. The way that they're releasing all of these different videos, the way that they released it where you could see it in the movie theater and they kind of broke down the tracks and showed, it's an experience. And I think that's what albums should be. And I think people should understand that these artists put a lot of themselves into these albums, into these songs. And speaking of the songs, Lux Eterna, I think, is a perfect way to introduce this album. I think that was the perfect single to lead off with. The next one that they released was Screaming. And that one I was also a big fan of. It went in a different direction than Lux Eterna. And then they released If Darkness Had a Son. And honestly, that's probably my least favorite track on the whole album. And then they released the track 72 Seasons, and it kind of went back to showing that this is going to kind of go in the direction of thrash. And again, had me excited about this album. But once I was able to get my hands on it, and once I was able to start listening to it, I just love the album overall. I think it just shows how they've grown as a band. It shows that they can go back to their roots, but it also shows that they're not afraid to kind of try a little bit of new stuff here and there. I mean, the only thing that I think that the album is actually missing is a slow track, I don't want to say a ballad, but you go back and you look at songs like Unforgiven and Nothing Else Matters and even Bleeding Me. Those are songs that, kind of change the pace of the album. This album is just, pedal to the floor pretty much the whole time, except for the last track, which is the song Inamorata. I think I'm saying that right. And honestly, that's probably my favorite track on the album. Now, this song is 11 minutes long, 11 plus, but it goes through this shift change, and it is very close to the track Bleeding Me as far as the style that it's done in, but it is a very interesting song for Metallica, and it kind of separates itself from the rest of the album, which again is pretty much a thrash album it's kind of like thrash meets Load and Reload, if I had to kind of categorize it in any kind of way. And I think that's a very interesting direction for them to go into, but I think it's a good way to just pull fans from the thrash era and fans from the post-Black Album era and just kind of compile it and put it together. It is a very interesting mix. I've listened to it in so many different ways, which is another thing that makes this album important. It's making me want to listen to music in as many ways as I can. I've listened to it with headphones, earbuds, the car stereo, the vinyl, the streaming. I'm testing out different headphones and earbuds with it. I think in the long run, it's another one that, it fits in their catalog. It fits the era and the time that they're going through right now. And it is a good album for all of these newer fans or newer, people that were exposed to Metallica through Stranger Things. It's a good album for them to get into because, it goes back to the longer songs. It goes back to having dueling guitars. The drums I've enjoyed a lot, even though some people say that they're, really, really processed to the point that maybe they don't enjoy them. It's just a very good, fast, energetic album, and it slows it down right there at the end with Inamorata, which again, I think is a track that kind of resembles some of their inspiration, like, Black Sabbath. When you're talking about them and the way that some of their earlier stuff was, it focuses a lot more on the vocals than it does, having the guitars just be right up front. And it's just an incredible track. And I think that one, along with Lux Eterna, along with the track You Must Burn, which I really, really enjoy. There's a lot to really like about this album. And again, even though I've listened to it over and over and over again, my least favorite track is still If Darkness Had a Son. I don't know what it is, but I do know that the Jimmy Kimmel performance of this song actually sounded great. So, I think a lot of this album is going to be one that is great for live performances, which again is another thing that Metallica is known for. So I think it's an exciting time again to be a Metallica fan. There's a lot of stuff out there right now with them. I mean, they're, doing Howard Stern, they're doing Jimmy Kimmel, they're releasing all these music videos, and there's a lot of content out there on them at an exciting time because of their popularity boost through Stranger Things. So, it feels fresh again, and that's exciting for a band that's been around for 40 plus years and for guys that are kind of hovering around 60 years old. But guys, that kind of wraps up. I don't want to say this is a review because it's not. I mean, maybe if I wanted to give it a review, I would give 72 Seasons an 8 out of 10. And again, I think it's only going to grow for me because every time I listen to it, I'm hearing other things that I like. I'm hearing things that I didn't hear the first time. The tracks are a little bit long. Sometimes it's like, okay, they could probably cut a minute or two off of each one of the songs, and I don't think it would have hurt it. It's 12 tracks total, coming in at about 77 minutes. So, sit back and enjoy it. Listen to this piece of art, because technically, in my opinion, that's what music really is. But guys, thank you so much for checking out this video. Thank you so much for checking out all the other videos. And as always, make sure to stay tuned for more.